Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are immersing ourselves in the profound complexity of this newly translated text, the Declarations of Neum from the Plates of Brass. And we're tackling one of its most critical issues, the spiritual authority and role of women within the covenant of Israel. This text, delivered through Neum, whose title oracle, it literally means utterance or declaration. It really forces a rigorous re-examination of how the divine delegates power.
Indeed. And the central question we really have to confront is this. Does the text unequivocally affirm the full restoration of female priesthood keys and, governing authority, basically parallel to that held by men, as a definitive decree from YHVH? Now, I know you maintain that the language used demands exactly that, a powerful parallel restoration of specific institutional authority.
That's right.
But I tend to come at it from a different angle. While the text is absolutely revolutionary in affirming female spiritual power, I believe it describes a distinct, conditional female spiritual leadership role. It's a vital and powerful position, no doubt, but historically separate, I'd argue, from the administrative functions we see with the male high priesthood. And its full realization seems contingent upon Israel achieving a specific state of collective righteousness, what the text calls Zion.
Okay, well, my position is founded on the clear expression of divine intent embedded directly within the revelation itself. Yahweh states explicitly, "Thus I did make thee a nation of kings and queens, and a nation of priests and priestesses. Yea, even so did I make thee a holy nation." Now, this isn't a partial promise. This is the fundamental covenantal definition of Israel. Neum, who, as you noted, writes from a historical perspective where this authority had been explicitly taken from the sisters, she prophesies for the last days that the daughters of Israel shall regain their strength and their authority, and that the priesthood will be restored. This kind of comprehensive language, to me, strongly suggests a return to a complete authoritative status, and that includes organizational governance. The mandate seems driven by the very nature of the Godhead itself.
The text confirms the existence of the divine feminine, noting that YHVH's mother sits upon her throne, and that the goddess Asherah presides in the heavenly council of Ha-Elohim. So the restoration of female authority on earth is therefore a divine imperative, mirroring the completeness and balance we see apparently in the highest echelons of divinity. The full spiritual power must be returned.
Right, and I see why you prioritize that covenantal decree as the ultimate driver. It certainly provides the spiritual foundation, but the text itself also provides the historical and, crucially, the behavioral context for why this restoration is even necessary. It notes the historical removal of female authority, after the daughters of Miriam were removed from their roles. This suggests the restoration is fundamentally solving a problem rooted in human oppression and sin, which, therefore requires human readiness to rectify. Historically, the authority of the daughters of Miriam included specific functions, like teaching the letters and leading sacred celebrations at the new and full moon. These were sacred roles, absolutely yes, but they were distinct from the administrative and sacrificial functions of the male Levitical priesthood. The promised return of authority is likewise tied, it seems, to the recovery of specific knowledge, learning the ancient letters and reading the stars. The text says the daughters of Israel will lead us once again in worship and in ritual and in learning. Now, this pedagogical and ritual function doesn't automatically equate to holding the administrative keys or governance of the entire body of Israel, which is, traditionally associated with the male high priesthood. And critically, the text is framed as a warning against current societal failings. The full spiritual recovery is explicitly conditional upon Israel's ability to successfully build Zion and the banishment of the wickedness of the oppression of Aaron. Since Neum herself warns that the wickedness of men remains pervasive, the complete and full scope of this restoration, I think, must remain pending.
Okay, that brings us neatly to our first point of contention then, defining what priesthood and authority actually mean for women in this specific context. You focus on ritual and learning, which are, yes, undeniably important, but the text elevates Neum far beyond just a simple teacher. She is ordained Mora HaMegdala, a title the Lexicon connects to a specific elevated Magdalene priesthood. Now, this title is explicitly paralleled by Zenock, who was ordained Mora HaTzedek, teacher of righteousness, a title which clearly granted him high priesthood authority, including institutional governance. So if Neum holds the female parallel title, doesn't that inherently include the equivalent governing keys? When the text speaks of a priesthood restored, doesn't that suggest a return to whatever constituted the highest degree of spiritual and organizational power in ancient Israel? The distinction you're drawing between spiritual power and organizational keys seems, well, maybe a bit arbitrary when viewed through the lens of these apparently equivalent high priesthood titles.
That's an interesting point, though. I would probably frame it differently. While the titles Mora HaMagdala and Mora HaTzedek, they sound grammatically parallel, sure. The text seems careful to distinguish the functions inherent in the sisterhood's authority. The daughters of Israel, and Neum specifically, are described as using the Urim and Thummim stones, instruments of divination, revelation, prophecy, to speak by the voice of YHVH. Now, this is supreme spiritual authority, I absolutely agree, but it's defined by direct revelation and acting as an oracle, not necessarily by organizational administration. The key tension here, as I see it, is between prophetic authority and governing keys. Neum's authority is manifest in bringing forth new revelation. Zenock's authority was manifest in organizing and administering the covenant. The historical list of prophetesses cited, Zipporah, Miriam, Deborah, Huldah, it confirms women received direct, powerful revelation and were leaders, certainly. But revelation authority, as historically speaking, often existed independently of the administrative keys required to organize the whole body of Israel into, say, an institution.
Okay, but that line of reasoning seems to minimize the impact of prophecy itself, doesn't it? Which leads directly into our second core point, the authoritative role of prophetesses as the very voice of Yahweh. You focus on the lexicon defining a prophetess simply as a spokesman or inspired teacher. I worry we might be projecting modern organizational constraints onto these ancient roles. Neum isn't just an inspired teacher. She is acting as an authoritative intermediary. She's delivering core revelations about the structure of the Godhead, providing the exact blueprint for the restoration of the sisterhood. She is giving commands from Yahweh on how to build Zion and how to organize. When YHVH speaks through a prophetess, as he spoke through Nahum, the oracle, that is the highest form of authority available, isn't it? I'm just not convinced that you can have this level of definitive spiritual mandate and simultaneously argue that it lacks institutional consequence or the inherent power to organize the people. The prophetesses listed throughout Israel's history were integral leaders. They often acted as military or judicial figures, not confined merely to ritual or instruction. If the spiritual mandate is genderless, as the text seems to confirm when YHVH speaks through her, then that mandate must include the highest degree of authority, regardless of our contemporary organizational diagrams.
Well, I'm not saying the authority is inconsequential at all. I am arguing that the scope might be distinct. The authority to organize the whole body of Israel, which historically required specific keys, to seal covenants and administer ordinances for the entire community, seems distinct from the authority to receive and declare revelation. Neum's entire purpose, as presented, is to warn Judah and instruct those who are scattered. If she had been given the full administrative keys, wouldn't we expect the text to describe her, reestablishing the administrative structure of the covenant people? It doesn't seem to do that. Her authority is to speak the word and to prepare the people. The power of the sisterhood, as described here, seems to be the power of the Urim and Thummim, the power of direct, unmediated revelation from the heavens, which is absolutely paramount, especially in times of apostasy.
That distinction is compelling, I grant you, but I feel it runs counter to the ultimate promise that this restoration cannot be averted. And this brings us to our third and perhaps most critical disagreement, the conditionality of restoration versus divine decree. You argue that the restoration remains pending due to human sin, primarily the wickedness of the oppression of Aaron, the institutional sin of men. But the powerful language used suggests otherwise to be. The text states the restoration of the daughter's authority cannot be averted because it is the very will of Yahweh. This implies a divine fixed future. While human failings are certainly noted, the decree itself seems meant to purify Israel irrespective of their immediate failings. Maybe the restoration itself is the very mechanism Yahweh uses to compel Israel toward righteousness, not merely the reward for having achieved it. Yahweh's power and mercy are meant to overcome the corruption of men, thereby confirming the full authority of women as a definitive act of purification.
That's a compelling argument, definitely, based on Yahweh's ultimate mercy. But we just cannot ignore the explicit link the text draws between Israel's spiritual failure and the scattering. I mean, the text makes it quite clear that Judah's whoredoms and forsaking the straight path led directly to their ruin. The restoration of the sisterhood is intrinsically tied, the text says, to Zion being made firm and free of the folly of mankind. Nahum is fundamentally issuing a warning that is conditioned on repentance, urging Israel to circumcise their hearts. If Israel doesn't heed that call and establish Zion, then the full scope of the promised blessings, including the peace and the full authority where crowns are placed upon the daughters' heads, well, it simply cannot be realized.
The promise that it cannot be averted might refer to Yahweh's ultimate intent to bring it about, sure, but the plates are frankly full of passages where the immediate realization of divine intent is delayed by the folly of mankind. That institutional authority seems conditional on the end of the wickedness of men and the establishment of a truly righteous organization.
So for me, the evidence strongly points to Yahweh's enduring intent to restore women to their full station as priests and priestesses. The Lord created Israel, as the text says, to be a nation of priests and priestesses, and that's a covenantal mandate that must eventually be fulfilled in parallel authority. This mandate is reinforced by Neum's authoritative title Mara HaMigdala, a title mirroring the male high priesthood, and her ability to utilize divine instruments of revelation. All this confirms, in my view, a complete and authoritative role. While the path design certainly requires human effort, the destination of full spiritual equality, including institutional authority and power, seems divinely secured and ultimately destined to purify the nation.
And I would conclude that while the prophecies are definitely clear regarding the future existence of powerful prophetesses and the recovery of essential spiritual knowledge, the text consistently frames this return within the context of required repentance, the end of the institutional oppression of Aaron, and the successful realization of Zion. So the authority granted to the sisterhood may remain distinct in its scope, focused powerfully on ritual, revelation, and learning until those necessary spiritual and collective conditions are actually met. Neum's words serve as a profound vision of future spiritual fulfillment, absolutely, but one that seems to be awaiting the necessary transformation of the covenant people before it can fully realize its institutional scope.
Well, regardless of whether one emphasizes the fixed divine decree or the challenging nature of human conditionality, the Declarations of Neum profoundly illuminates a crucial historical and future spiritual reality concerning the integral role of women.
It certainly prompts a deeper study of the complexities inherent within the covenant of Israel.